What if there were tangible objects that came into contact with Jesus, which have survived across the centuries and can still be seen today? We are about to uncover the authentic artifacts connected to Jesus at the cross, within the tomb, and during the resurrection. Even after 2,000 years, they stand as powerful testaments to the historical reality of Jesus' story. Let's begin with the first, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the very tomb that forever altered the course of human history. For 2 millennia, countless pilgrims have journeyed to Jerusalem, drawn to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with the conviction that this is the sacred ground where Jesus rose from the dead. And yet, a significant question has always lingered in the background. Was this truly the correct location? For centuries, no one dared to seek verification. The answer was quite literally entombed beneath a formidable slab of marble. Then, in 2016, an extraordinary permit was granted to a team of scientists and archaeologists. They were given the historic opportunity, for the first time in 5 centuries, to move the stone as part of a restoration project. What they would uncover upon lifting that slab had the potential to change everything. It could either dissolve 2 millennia of belief or affirm it for all time. With immense care, they first raised the topmost layer of marble, which revealed a second slab beneath it. This one was clearly much older and bore the marking of a crudely carved cross. The sense of anticipation was almost unbearable. When they lifted this second slab, they found it, the original bedrock of the cave. Scientific analysis delivered a message with absolute clarity. The cave was dated to the 1st century, placing it in the exact era of Christ. The tomb was indeed authentic. But the most profound discovery of all was not what they found inside. It was what they did not find. The body of Jesus was gone. The tomb was empty. This very absence forms the foundation of Christianity. As the angel declared to the women who arrived at the tomb, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen." Can you think of any other major religion whose founder is honored with an empty tomb? Only Christ. But how was it known from the very beginning that this was the right tomb? The Gospel of John provides the account that, following the crucifixion, a man of considerable wealth named Joseph of Arimathea requested the body of Jesus. The text states that at the site of the crucifixion there was a garden, and within that garden was a new tomb. Because this tomb was so close, they laid Jesus there. That tomb was then sealed. But after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, every trace of that small garden was lost for nearly 300 years. The hallowed location had simply vanished. This remained the case until the 4th century, when Empress Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, embarked on a journey to the Holy Land. She was driven by a powerful determination to locate the places where Christ had lived, died, and was resurrected. Her entire mission was centered on finding Jesus' tomb, and she succeeded. Helena was able to identify the precise location, and her son, Emperor Constantine, commanded that a grand basilica be constructed to safeguard what was considered the most sacred place on earth. Since that time, this basilica has endured everything imaginable: invasions, desecrations, fires, and earthquakes, and yet it continues to stand. Inside, you find the very heart of the faith, a small shrine known as the Aedicule. It is built to shelter Christ's empty tomb and is composed of 2 chambers. The first is called the Chapel of the Angel, where it is believed the women received the announcement that would forever change the world. "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen." The second room is the burial chamber itself. It contains the original stone slab where his body was once placed. For centuries, that stone was concealed under marble, hidden away from public view. But in 2016, as scientists removed the protective slab for the restoration, something truly remarkable occurred. Witnesses reported that as they exposed the original stone where the body of Christ had rested, a soft and serene light began to radiate from it, a luminescence that no scientific instrument could capture or explain. Today, the tomb has been sealed once more for its preservation, but millions of pilgrims continue to make the journey. They kneel, touch the stone, and offer prayers, fully convinced they are at the spot where death itself was overcome. Anyone who steps into the Holy Sepulchre today can feel they are in a place unlike any other. The air is thick with the scent of ancient incense. Candles cast a flickering glow in the shadows, and prayers spoken in dozens of languages blend together into a single, continuous murmur. This is not a museum or a monument. It is the very place where history was divided in two. It was here that death was defeated and a hope was born that would never die again. This is the epicenter of Christianity, the holiest ground on the planet. This reality leads to a rather unsettling question. If this location is the heart of the faith, then who possesses its keys? The answer is quite surprising. The keys are not held by the Pope, nor by any Orthodox or Christian patriarch. Since the 12th century, the keys to the Holy Sepulchre have been entrusted to two Muslim families. That's right, the most sacred site for Christians is under the guardianship of two Muslim families who open its doors each morning. How could such an arrangement have come to be? In the 7th century, following the Crusades, control over the Holy Sepulchre became a source of extreme conflict. Catholics, Orthodox Christians, Greeks, and Armenians all laid claim to ownership of the church. The disagreements became so intense that physical altercations would break out within the sanctuary itself. Then, in 1187, Sultan Saladin made a truly brilliant decision to restore peace. He entrusted the custody of the keys to two neutral Muslim families, the Nusibas, who were tasked with opening the door, and the Judas, who were responsible for safeguarding the keys. In this manner, no single Christian denomination could assert authority, because the Muslims, being neutral in these internal disputes, served as the arbiters of access. And this is how it remains to this day. Now, more than 800 years later, these two families continue to fulfill their mission, opening and closing the basilica's doors every morning and every evening. But the story doesn't end there. Because tensions have flared so frequently over time, a very rigid agreement was established. No one is permitted to alter anything without the unanimous consent of all other parties. This is the reason why, on the facade of the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre, you can see a wooden ladder resting beneath a window. That ladder has remained in the exact same spot, unmoved, for more than 250 years. The issue is that the ladder belongs to several denominations simultaneously, and no one can move it because doing so would require a unanimous agreement, a consensus that has never been achieved. Although there have been attempts to remove it, each time someone has tried, protests have broken out, and it has been returned to its original place. Today, it is known as the immovable ladder, and has become a symbol of the ongoing tensions among the Christian communities that share the Holy Sepulchre. But there are two more things that leave a lasting impression on those who visit Jesus' empty tomb. First, the cross and the tomb are located in the same place, within the same building. Yes, inside the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre, the site where Jesus died on the cross, Golgotha or Calvary, and the tomb where he was laid are just a few steps from each other. That is why when you enter the church, you have the choice to proceed to the tomb or to climb a steep set of stairs. When you reach the top, you are standing on the rock of Calvary, the very rock where the cross of Jesus was erected. Death and resurrection are separated by only a few yards. What the Gospels describe over several chapters, you can experience here in a matter of minutes. But there is something else. The burial chamber that once held the body of Jesus is both small and low. To see the place, you are required to bow. You must stoop down. You cannot walk in standing upright. You must lower yourself to pass through the small entrance. This physical act has become an integral part of the ritual of the place. It is a gesture of humility and profound reverence before one can behold the glory within. The contrast is powerful. You ascend Calvary standing tall with effort. You enter the tomb bent low in a state of vulnerability. And once you are inside, everything is transformed. The space is minimal. The place is so small that you feel an intimate closeness to it all. It is a deeply personal moment. In this way, the architecture itself makes you small, so that you can enter into the greatest mystery of all, the place where death was vanquished. Thousands of pilgrims have this experience every year. They climb to see where Jesus died, and then bend down to see where he rose. They touch the cold stone, they pray in silence, and they leave forever changed. But inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right at the entrance, something causes everyone to pause. A stone slab set into the floor. This is the stone of anointing. This is the place where the body of Jesus was laid after being taken down from the cross. The stone that held the lifeless body of the Son of God was where he was lovingly prepared for burial. That heartbreaking moment took place right here. Today, pilgrims who enter the Holy Sepulchre encounter it almost immediately. It is a block of reddish stone, polished smooth by the touch of centuries. What is so remarkable is that, despite the passage of time, many accounts claim the stone still emits a strong fragrance, like a balm or myrrh, an echo of the perfumes used to anoint Christ. But there is another object connected to Jesus that still exists today, one that did more than just witness his death. It completely enveloped him, preserved his final image, and contains a mystery that no one has yet been able to solve. The second object is the Shroud of Turin. In a cathedral in Turin, Italy, rests something truly extraordinary. At first glance, it may not seem like much. A linen cloth, approximately 13 feet long and 3 feet wide, yellowed with age. But this is known as the Holy Shroud, the burial cloth believed to have wrapped the body of Jesus after the crucifixion. And in 1898, an amateur photographer forever changed its history. Secondo Pia took a photograph of it, and when he was developing the glass plate in his dark room, something amazing happened. What appeared as little more than a faint blur on the cloth became, on the photographic negative, the clear and detailed image of a crucified man. The figure was that of a man between 30 and 40 years old, with a beard and long hair, and his body told a story of extreme violence. His torso was scourged, his forehead was wounded by thorns, his wrists and feet were pierced by nails, his side had been thrust through, his knees were injured from falls, and one shoulder was marked as if it had carried an immense weight. Every single wound corresponded with the gospel accounts of the Passion of Christ. But one detail left everyone baffled. The image of the man on the shroud is anatomically precise. The wounds align with what we now understand about Roman crucifixion. For instance, the nails are not in the palms of the hands, as is commonly depicted in medieval paintings, but in the wrists, the only location capable of supporting the body's weight without tearing. This anatomical fact was unknown in the Middle Ages. So how could a supposed medieval forger have known this centuries before it was discovered? The mystery had only just begun. The Shroud of Turin went on to become the most studied relic in human history. Science attempted to provide an answer. In 1988, radiocarbon dating tests dated the shroud to the Middle Ages, somewhere between 1260 and 1390. Researchers declared it to be a masterfully crafted forgery, but a forgery all the same. However, a significant flaw in the testing soon came to light. The samples had been taken from a corner of the cloth that had been repaired by nuns in the 16th century following a fire. They had inadvertently analyzed a patch that was contaminated with much more recent threads. The debate reignited more intensely than ever before. Scientists returned to study the cloth and discovered something astonishing. Embedded within its fibers were pollen grains from plants that are found exclusively in Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. Some of these plants, like Gundalia tournefortii, bloom only in the spring, the season of the Jewish Passover, the very season of the Crucifixion. The Gospel of John recounts, "So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen cloths with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews." And as they continued to study the cloth, something defied all explanation. The image itself is not made of paint. There are no pigments or brushstrokes. It is an incredibly superficial scorch that touches only the outermost fibers of the linen, without penetrating them. And even more remarkably, it carries three-dimensional information. In 1976, NASA became involved, and when they used a VP8 image analyzer, a device originally designed to map the surfaces of planets, it revealed something astounding. The image contained three-dimensional data. When processed, the face and body rise in perfect relief, much like a laser scan. No flat painting or photograph can produce such a result. What kind of energy could possibly create an image like this? Some scientists have proposed a burst of radiation, a brief, intense flash of light that seared the cloth, as if the body emitted a pulse of light in a single moment. It's something science cannot explain, but which the scriptures describe with precision: the resurrection. But there is another puzzling detail. A corpse wrapped in cloth for more than 36 hours would leave behind traces of decomposition, but not here. The shroud is clean. There are no signs of decay. It is as if the body simply vanished from within the cloth, without disturbing the linen at all. As scripture tells, when Peter arrived at the tomb, he saw the linen cloths lying there. But the cloth that had been on Jesus' head was not with the linens, but was folded up in a place by itself. The shroud story is shrouded in mystery. It first appears in historical records in 14th century France under the guardianship of a knight. Yet, many believe it existed earlier as the enigmatic mandilion of Edessa, a cloth venerated in the East since the 6th century that depicted a face not made by human hands. What is certain is that in 1578 it arrived in Turin, and since then it has survived wars, plundering, and fires. In 1997, another fire threatened to destroy it, but a firefighter managed to rescue it at the last moment by smashing through the armored glass. That event turned it into a symbol of survival, as if its story was destined to never be erased. Today, the Holy Shroud rests in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, protected, guarded, and displayed only on rare occasions. Millions of pilgrims have traveled to see it in silence, convinced that they are standing before the silent witness to the very instant when death was conquered. But the story doesn't end there. Scientists discovered something else on the cloth. They detected traces of real human blood on the wounds. It was AB blood type, which is rare. The blood exhibited a biochemical peculiarity. It contained high levels of bilirubin, something that is seen in the body of a person who has died under conditions of extreme physical stress and torture. And then the scientists posed a question. Could this blood be the same as the blood found on the Sudarium of Oviedo, the cloth that, according to tradition, covered Jesus' face immediately after his death? They decided to conduct the definitive test, to compare the blood analyses from the two relics. This brings us to our third object, the Sudarium of Oviedo. In Spain, there is a cloth known as the Sudarium of Oviedo. It measures only about 80 centimeters in length, and, according to tradition, is the cloth that was placed over Jesus' face as he was taken down from the cross, before he was wrapped in the Holy Shroud. The Gospel of John mentions it specifically. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. From the very beginning, Christians understood that there were two cloths, a large shroud that covered the entire body, and this smaller one, the Sudarium, which shielded Jesus' face. But unlike the Holy Shroud, this cloth does not bear an image, only blood stains. And those stains tell a story with forensic precision. The suffering of a man crowned with thorns, with a bloodied nose and mouth, and with signs indicating death by asphyxiation, the ultimate cause of death in a crucifixion. The large central stain around the nose and mouth, combined with traces of pleural fluid, reveals the agony of a traumatic death by asphyxiation on the cross. Forensic science has been used to study these stains to reconstruct what happened. First, the cloth was placed over the face while the body was still upright on the cross, which explains the presence of fresh blood mixed with clotted blood. Then, the fabric appears to have been folded around the head, which left marks on the back as well. Later, when the body was taken down to be prepared for burial, this Sudarium was carefully removed, and the body was then wrapped completely in the Holy Shroud. In this way, this small cloth is like a fragment of the story of Calvary at Golgotha. Then, the moment of truth arrived. Scientists decided to compare the blood tests from the Shroud of Turin with those from the Sudarium of Oviedo. Could two cloths, separated by thousands of miles, tell the very same story? The answer is truly remarkable. First, both cloths share the same blood type, AB. This blood type is very rare in Europe, but is far more common in the region where Jesus lived, the Middle East. But there is more. The scientists used digital technology to overlay the bloodstains from the Sudarium onto the image of the face on the shroud. The correspondence was perfect. The wounds, the shape of the nose, the mouth, the forehead, everything aligned down to the millimeter, as if the two linens had been in contact with the same head. And the analyses revealed even more striking details. In the fibers of the fabric, they found traces of aloe and myrrh. Does that sound familiar? These are the very aromatic plants that, according to the Gospel of John, chapter 19, Nicodemus brought to prepare Jesus' body for burial. They also discovered pollen grains from plants that grow only in Palestine and North Africa. This raised a new question. If the Sudarium originated in Jerusalem, how did it end up in Spain? Its journey has been documented. In the year 614 AD, as the Persians were invading, it was quickly removed from Jerusalem and taken to Alexandria, Egypt, for protection. From there, it was transported across the Mediterranean to Spain, fleeing the advance of the Muslims. Finally, a Spanish king named Alfonso II constructed a special and secure place to house it, the Holy Chamber of the Oviedo Cathedral, where it has remained for over 1,000 years. What is so fascinating is that while the shroud captivates us with the mystery of its image, the Sudarium of Oviedo moves us because of its raw and tangible reality. It is the missing piece that the story was waiting for. Together, the two cloths tell the complete story. The Sudarium, a witness to the blood shed on Golgotha, and the shroud, a witness to the glorified body in the tomb. That small detail in the Gospel of John that once seemed insignificant now takes on extraordinary meaning. There were two linens, two pieces of the same puzzle that 2,000 years later tell us, through both science and faith, the story of the passion and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. Our fourth object is the Holy Chalice. In the Cathedral of Valencia, Spain, the Holy Chalice is preserved, an agate cup that millions venerate as the very cup from the Last Supper, the true Holy Grail. On that night, Jesus took a cup and spoke the words that would establish a new covenant between God and humanity. Over that cup, the most significant words in history were uttered. This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. Archaeologists have examined the chalice using modern technology, and their conclusion is astonishing. They confirm that the agate cup dates to the period between the 2nd century BC and the 1st century AD, precisely the time of Christ. Furthermore, its style and material perfectly match the Jewish blessing cups used in Passover celebrations during the 1st century. The Holy Grail is not just a medieval fantasy, it is real. Far from the gilded, jewel-encrusted grails of medieval legends, the original cup is humble and small, exactly the kind that a carpenter from Nazareth would have used. The base, the handles, and the jewels are all much later additions, fitted in the Middle Ages to adorn it for ceremonies. The vessel that held the blood of Christ was simple and austere. But if it is authentic, how did it manage to survive for 2,000 years? And how did it make the journey from Jerusalem all the way to Spain? Tradition holds that the Apostle Peter carried it to Rome. There, the early popes and the Christian community guarded it in secret, passing it down from one generation to the next. It was the symbol of the covenant. However, the Roman Empire unleashed its persecutions. Christians were hunted down, and their sacred objects were destroyed. Yet each generation entrusted the chalice to the next as its most precious treasure, until a critical moment arrived. Rome was ablaze under the persecution of Valerian in the year 258. A deacon named Lawrence, before being martyred on a gridiron, handed the chalice to Spanish soldiers. And on a clandestine journey, the cup crossed the sea to Hispania, far beyond the reach of the empire. The chalice was taken to Huesca, Lawrence's birthplace. There it remained hidden until the year 711, when the Muslims arrived. This began an odyssey that lasted for 8 centuries. Christians concealed it in the caves of the Pyrenees. They carried it from one monastery to another, until it finally reached San Juan de la Peña, an impregnable monastic fortress in Aragon. For 400 years, the monks guarded it deep within the rock. And at last, in the 15th century, the chalice was moved to the Valencia Cathedral, where it has remained safe to this day, bringing its incredible journey to a close. But its story is not merely a legend. Kings and popes have revered it as authentic. Sixtus II and Benedict XVI acknowledged it. And in our own time, Popes John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis have all celebrated Mass in Valencia using this very cup. "Take this, all of you, and drink from it," Jesus said on that night. 2,000 years later, this cup of the first covenant is still present in the world, a silent witness to the most important night in history. And what is so remarkable is that the legend of the Holy Grail originates from this very relic. It all started in the Middle Ages. Troubadours and monks took the story of the cup of the Last Supper and transformed it. It was no longer just a cup. It became the Holy Grail, an object that could grant eternal life, heal mortal wounds, and connect seekers directly to God. Yet this power was not available to everyone. The legend was clear. Only the knights with the purest hearts, those without a single stain on their souls, would be worthy of finding it. And so, the most famous quest in history was born, that of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The legend grew so powerful that it sparked a search that would last for centuries. People were looking for a cup, but there was also talk of a mystical stone that had fallen from the sky. No one knew for sure, but kings, crusaders, and secret societies hunted for it relentlessly, convinced that its power could remake the world. The obsession intensified. Secret crusades were launched, and clandestine expeditions were organized. Kings and popes funded desperate searches. Thousands of people died chasing a phantom. And while thousands of knights were bleeding out on the sands of the Holy Land, a mysterious order grew in power and in secrets. The Knights Templar. Officially, they were warrior monks. Their stated mission was to protect pilgrims arriving in Jerusalem. But soon, unsettling rumors began to circulate. Their headquarters was not just any place. It was built on top of the ruins of the very Temple of Solomon, sacred ground where the presence of God had once descended. This sparked a suspicion. What were the Templars really doing there? While some fought, other Templars did the unthinkable. They secretly dug beneath the ruins. They were hunting for the most powerful relics of the faith, the Ark of the Covenant, the spear that pierced Christ, and above all, the Holy Grail. As the years passed, the Templars' wealth and influence grew beyond imagination. Their power became so great that kings and popes owed them favors. A rumor spread across Europe like wildfire. The Templars had found the Grail. But in 1312, it all came crashing down. King Philip IV of France, envious and deeply in debt, accused the Templars of heresy. He had them arrested, tortured, and sent to the stake. It seemed to be the end. Yet, just before he died, their leader, Jacques de Molay, hurled a curse and one final secret into the world. The Templars had been defeated, but their treasure had not. They had hidden it. So, where is the Holy Grail? One clue points to a castle in flames in France, Montségur. The story goes that just before it fell, 4 knights slipped away into the darkness. They were not carrying gold, but something far more precious. Legend says it was the Grail. Another clue crosses the sea to Scotland, to a place steeped in mystery, Rosslyn Chapel. Its walls are not ordinary stone. They are a carved map, etched with Templar symbols and images of plants that did not even exist in Europe at that time. This detail has baffled historians for centuries. Even now, many believe the Grail is not in a museum, but is buried right there, waiting. The Templars vanished, but their shadow and their quest endured. Later, secret orders inherited the obsession. Yet no one ever managed to solve the riddle. The Holy Chalice even obsessed Adolf Hitler. He believed that the cup of the Last Supper was not merely a Christian relic, but the key to a hidden force capable of granting dominion over peoples and nations. To find it, he created the Ahnenerbe, a Nazi secret society devoted to the occult and archaeology. One of its expeditions reached the monastery of Montserrat in Catalonia, Spain. The Nazis were fascinated by its craggy silhouette, surrounded by medieval myths and legends. For centuries, rumors had circulated there that the Grail was hidden by guardian monks, kept far from the reach of ambitious men. Hitler's envoys arrived in secret, met with the Benedictine monks, and combed the mountain for hidden entrances, passageways, and caves. The Nazis were convinced that if they found the cup, the Führer would be invincible. But Montserrat kept its secret. The Grail never appeared, and Hitler died without ever possessing it. What is so unsettling is that while Europe went mad for centuries hunting the Grail, the true chalice rested quietly in Valencia, and cinema turned that obsession into a global phenomenon. Movies like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade depicted it as a humble carpenter's cup, while the Da Vinci Code reimagined it as a secret bloodline. In all of them, the Grail was an object of hidden power, capable of changing the fate of humanity. But reality surpasses fiction in an unexpected way. What the world imagined as a golden treasure was a simple vessel, just a stone polished by Jewish hands 2,000 years ago. Because the true power was never in the cup itself, but in the blood it held, and in the words that changed the world forever. Our fifth object is the true cross. The cross was the Roman Empire's most feared instrument of torture. In Christianity, it became the supreme symbol of redemption. Legend says that the wood on which Jesus was crucified did not disappear. It was discovered 3 centuries later by a woman, Saint Helena. Do you remember her? Yes, the mother of Emperor Constantine, the very one who searched for and found Jesus' tomb. In the year 326, Helena traveled to Jerusalem, led by her faith, and ordered excavations on Mount Calvary. There, near the empty tomb, they found not 1, but 3 crosses. This presented a problem. How could they determine which of the 3 belonged to Jesus? To find the true cross of Christ, they brought the 3 crosses, one by one, to the body of a man who had just died. The first 2 had no effect, but when the 3rd one touched him, the man came back to life. There was no doubt about it. This was the true cross, the very cross that had held the body of Jesus. From then on, the cross was broken into pieces and venerated around the world. The largest fragment was kept in Jerusalem, in the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre. Another piece was sent to Rome, and another to Constantinople, the new capital of the empire. The rest was divided into hundreds of slivers, which were sent out as relics to countless churches. This scattering created a credibility problem. Centuries later, skeptics would quip that there were so many splinters that you could build an entire ship with them. But in the 19th century, a study was conducted to catalog every known relic of the true cross. The result was unexpected. When the volume of all the verified authentic fragments was added up, there was not enough wood to form even a single cross. This suggests that while some are replicas, the original relics are far rarer than the skeptics believed. The Bible itself does not speak of the relic, but it does trace its path. The Gospels tell us that they took Jesus, and he went out, carrying his own cross, to the place called the Skull, which in Aramaic is Golgotha. The scene is brutal when you consider the details. The cross was not a light burden. Historians estimate that the patibulum, the horizontal beam laid across the condemned man's shoulders, weighed about 50 kilos, roughly 110 pounds. Flogged to the point of exhaustion, bleeding and weak, Jesus was forced to carry it through the narrow streets of Jerusalem to the execution site outside the city walls. Along the way, the soldiers saw that he could go no further and compelled a man, Simon of Cyrene, to help him bear the cross, while the women of Jerusalem wept. Even in his agony, Jesus paused to address them with prophetic words. "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children." The road ended at Golgotha, the place of the skull. Later, to commemorate this painful journey, Christian tradition formed the Via Crucis, the Way of Sorrows, a path of 14 stations that can still be walked in Jerusalem today. But Empress Helena found more than just the true cross. Alongside it, she discovered something else. Our sixth object, the nails of the crucifixion. Yes, Helena also discovered the nails from Jesus' crucifixion, the iron spikes that pierced his hands and feet at Golgotha. According to Eusebius of Caesarea, Helena gave them to her son, Constantine, and from them several relics were forged. One nail was embedded in his imperial crown. Another was turned into the bit of his war horse to guide him with a divine hand in battle. The rest were distributed to prominent churches. Today, several nails are venerated as relics. You can see them at the Basilica of the Holy Cross in Jerusalem in Rome, or at the Cathedral of Milan, among other places. But after 2,000 years, could they be genuine? Scientific studies on some of these nails reveal that they are Roman iron, forged with first-century techniques. The studies cannot prove that they were the very nails used in the crucifixion of Jesus, but they conclude that they are historically possible. However, archaeology has given us an even more astonishing clue. For centuries, many people imagined Jesus being nailed through the palms of his hands. But in 1968, in Jerusalem, the skeleton of a crucified man was found, with a 7-inch nail driven through his heel bone. This means that the crucifixion described in the Gospels was a real and brutal Roman practice. And so, what had been an instrument of torture became a symbol of victory. Emperor Constantine did not wear the nail on his helmet as a trophy of death, but as a talisman of heavenly protection. Today, the nails are venerated by thousands of believers, and they remind us of Christ's suffering and the sacrifice he made for all of us, the path to eternal salvation. But alongside the nails, Empress Helena found another object. This brings us to our seventh object, the crown of thorns. The Gospels tell how Roman soldiers wove a crown of thorns. They pressed it down on Jesus' head and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" But what they could not have imagined was that this act of humiliation would become the emblem of his eternal kingship. For centuries, the crown vanished from the historical record, until Empress Helena brought it to the capital of her empire, Constantinople. There it was guarded as the most sacred treasure for more than 1,000 years. Then, in the 13th century, the Byzantine emperor went bankrupt and sold it to Louis IX of France, who carried it to Paris in 1239. To safeguard it, the king did not build a fortress to lock it away, but a chapel that seemed to be made of light, Paris's Sainte-Chapelle, a monumental reliquary of glass and gold. But if you could see the crown today, you would be surprised. It is not what you might imagine. The relic is not a complete ring of thorns, as we usually picture in paintings, but a circle of braided reeds to which thorny branches were later attached. Over the centuries, many of those thorns were removed and distributed as relics to churches across Europe. What remains in Paris is the ring of rushes, roughly 8 inches across, along with a few associated thorns. Strikingly, scientists have examined the object as well, identifying the plant material as eastern rushes, likely from the Jordan Valley, and dated to around the 1st century. The crown has survived fires, wars, and looting. Even in the devastating 2019 blaze at Notre Dame, firefighters managed to save it in a dramatic rescue. It had outlasted the fall of empires, revolutions, and wars. But its greatest trial came on April 15, 2019, a night the world will not forget. The whole world watched live as Notre Dame Cathedral burned. Millions saw the central spire collapse, the roof give way, and wept, fearing that one of Christianity's most sacred relics would be reduced to ashes. But amid the chaos, through the smoke and embers, a team of firefighters, led by the chaplain of the Paris Fire Brigade, Jean-Marc Fournier, risked their lives to enter the burning cathedral. Their mission was not to save the building, but to rescue the crown of thorns and the Blessed Sacrament. Knowing that every second could be their last, they broke through the barriers, lifted the reliquary, and under a rain of embers, managed to carry it out in the midst of the chaos. The moment became a symbol. As the cathedral burned, they emerged from the smoke with the crown in their hands. The next day, when the reliquary was shown to be intact, Paris and the world received it as a sign. The crown had endured once again. It was a powerful symbol. The crown, which represents Christ's suffering, was saved from the flames, an echo of the resurrection. Today, as Notre Dame is being rebuilt, the crown of thorns rests in the Louvre under strict guard. It is displayed to the faithful only one day a year, Good Friday. The paradox endures. What was once an instrument of torture is now an object of veneration. And every missing thorn scattered across the world reminds us that suffering spreads, but the truth of its message remains. But Empress Helena discovered and safeguarded 2 more relics. Our 8th object, the Holy Stairs. In Rome, across from the Basilica of St. John Lateran, there are 28 stone steps that conceal a secret. They are called the Holy Stairs. Tradition holds that they are the very steps from the staircase of Pontius Pilate's Praetorium, the Roman governor who tried Jesus. These are the very steps Jesus climbed on the day of his trial, when he was brought before Pontius Pilate. He went up them with a crown of thorns piercing his brow, and his back torn by scourging, just as the Bible says. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. Upon this marble, Christ shed drops of blood as he listened to the sentence condemning him to death, and heard the crowd's jeers and insults. On these steps, Pilate's question rang out, What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ? On these steps, the fate of the Son of God was sealed. But if the steps were in Jerusalem, how did they end up in Rome? Once again, a woman holds the answer. Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine. In the 4th century, during her pilgrimage to the Holy Land, when she also found the true cross and Jesus' tomb, she came upon the holy stairs. Convinced that the Savior had walked on those very steps, Helena ordered that they be taken to Rome. From then on, a ritual of penance was born. Pilgrims do not climb this staircase on foot. They go up on their knees. They go up on their knees, praying an Our Father on each step. It is a way to relive, step by step, Christ's path to his judgment, and thousands of people still do it today. The steps bear age-old wear, deep marks carved by the millions of pilgrims who have climbed them on their knees. In some places, the marble is worn so deep that the passage of human time across the stone is unmistakable. Archaeologists have confirmed that the marble dates to the 1st century, the very era when Jesus lived, and that it comes from quarries near Jerusalem. Science backs what faith has believed for centuries. But there is something that few people know about these stairs. The steps are covered with wood to protect them, but in a few places there are small glass windows. Through them you can see dark stains. Tradition says that those stains are the blood of Jesus, blood that time has not been able to erase. For centuries, the faithful could only see the stains through the glass. But in 2019, for the first time in 300 years, the wood was removed, allowing pilgrims to touch the worn, original marble. Believe it or not, this staircase may have sparked one of the greatest divisions in the history of Christianity. The story goes that a monk named Martin Luther once climbed these steps on his knees. He was seeking to earn indulgences, which at the time were a way to obtain the forgiveness of sins. Luther was searching for peace, but what he felt was a spiritual conflict that would change his life forever. The story goes that as he climbed in prayer, something inside him broke. He realized that climbing stairs was not the way to find God. The experience triggered a profound crisis of faith, sowing the seeds of doubt that would lead him to launch the Protestant Reformation. And here lies the great paradox. A staircase of judgment became a path of faith for the thousands of believers who climb the stairs on their knees. It is a profound act, a way to accompany Christ in his suffering. And so, these 28 marble steps ceased to be mere stone and became a living relic, a bridge that travels 2,000 years back in time to the moment of judgment that changed world history forever. And the last object that Empress Helena found was our 9th object, the Tunic of Trier. In the German city of Trier, an astonishing relic is kept, the Holy Tunic of Christ, which tradition says is the very garment Jesus wore on the day of the Crucifixion. But how can we be sure that it is the same garment? The Bible gives us a crucial clue. The Gospel of John describes the tunic in a very specific way. It was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. And the Tunic of Trier matches that description perfectly. It is an ancient, fragile, reddish-brown piece of wool, woven all at once, without a single seam. That tunic was stripped from Jesus' body at Golgotha, but the Roman soldiers, instead of tearing it to divide it among themselves, decided to cast lots to see who would get it, unknowingly fulfilling an ancient prophecy. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. But how did Jesus' tunic end up in a cathedral in Germany? Tradition says that Saint Helena discovered the tunic in Jerusalem and carried it with her to Trier, a city where she herself had once lived. Since then, Trier Cathedral has been its home. Whenever it is publicly displayed, millions of the faithful come on pilgrimage, turning the city into a center of faith. Because of its age, it has been reinforced and protected multiple times, which complicates certain scientific studies. Yet it remains an object of universal veneration. For the Christian faith, this seamless tunic is a powerful symbol of the unity of the Church, the body of Christ that cannot be divided. Just as the tunic remained intact, the Church is called to remain united. Today, the Holy Tunic of Trier stands as a witness of faith to that moment when Christ was stripped of everything to give himself completely. Our 10th object is the Lance of Longinus. It was a dark Friday in Jerusalem. The sky had darkened over Golgotha. Then the Roman soldiers approached the crosses. Their mission was simple and brutal: to confirm the deaths. They broke the legs of the two thieves to hasten the end. But when they came to Jesus, they stopped. He had already died. Then one of them did something unexpected. He took his spear and pierced Christ's side. And in that instant, the impossible happened. One of the soldiers opened his side with a spear, and at once blood and water flowed out. How could water flow from a dead body? The witnesses were perplexed, but the first Christians understood the mystery at once. The blood was the wine of the Eucharist, the promise of a new covenant, and the water was the cleansing of baptism, the birth into a new life. From the open wound in Christ's side, just as Eve was born from Adam's side, the Church was being born. But who was the soldier who wielded the spear? The Gospels do not name him, yet the earliest Christian communities called him Longinus. He was the centurion in command, and his spear was marked by the blood of Christ. Longinus looked up. Everything he had witnessed fell into place, and with a conviction that would change his life, he declared, "Truly, this was the Son of God." That moment was no accident. It fulfilled an ancient prophecy. The prophet Zechariah had foretold, "They will look on the one they have pierced." John, who stood there and saw it, would later write with solemnity, "He who saw it has borne witness, and his testimony is true." There, at the foot of the cross, Longinus understood. That day, the course of this Roman soldier's life changed forever. The man overseeing Jesus' death was shaken to his core. He went from executioner to witness. At the foot of the cross, Longinus became the first Gentile to believe that he is the Son of God. He relinquished a high post in the most powerful empire on earth and joined the followers of Jesus. He carried the message to distant lands, proclaiming the gospel with the passion of one who had seen it all and been transformed. But his end was tragic. For years, he traveled through the regions of Cappadocia and Caesarea, in what is now Turkey. There, Longinus preached the gospel, and many believed. His testimony was powerful because he had been there. He was the centurion who stood at the foot of the cross. But Rome does not forgive those who defy its authority. So he was pursued, and eventually Longinus was arrested. They offered him his freedom if he would deny Christ. But Longinus, serene with the peace of one who had found the truth, stood firm in his faith. And so he was condemned. The very empire that had trained him as a soldier would now execute him as a traitor. They led him to the outskirts of the city. There, on a barren hill, he was beheaded. And so, Longinus died a martyr in Caesarea. Today, several spears are claimed to be the true one. There is one in the Vatican, another in Armenia, and the most famous in Vienna. Scientific analyses are inconclusive, but what few know is that one of them, the Vienna spear, conceals a far darker secret. Adolf Hitler became obsessed with it when he saw it at the Hofburg Museum. He was convinced that whoever possessed it would be invincible. In 1938, he stole it and moved it to Nuremberg as a trophy of the Third Reich. But the Allies recovered it on the very day that he died. It was returned to Vienna, where it can still be seen today in the imperial treasury. But the spear's true power is not found in dark legends or superstition. Its power lies in what it revealed. The Gospel reminds us that the weapon meant to confirm death became the instrument that opened the wellspring of life. The spear not only proved that Jesus had died, it showed that his death was the beginning of everything. It is not just a weapon, it is the key that opened the side from which the Church was born. But there is another object, possibly the most powerful of all, one that comes from before the time of Jesus, the Ark of the Covenant. At the heart of the Old Testament appears an object so powerful that walls fell and rivers stopped at its mere presence. A chest that housed the throne of God on earth. Moses built the ark exactly as God had instructed him on Sinai. Inside it lay the tablets of the law, Aaron's staff, and a portion of the heavenly manna. Its power was legendary and terrifying. When Moses finished building the tabernacle in the wilderness and placed the ark in the most holy place, something happened that shook all of Israel. A dense cloud descended over the tent, and the glory of the Lord filled the sanctuary with such intensity that not even Moses could enter. Before it, the Jordan River parted in two so that Israel could cross. And in its presence, the invincible walls of Jericho collapsed as if they were sand. Wherever the ark went, victory was certain. But this divine power demanded absolute reverence. No one could touch it with their bare hands. Only the Levites could carry it, and even then, improper contact meant death. That is what happened to Uzzah, a man who reached out to steady the ark when it lurched so that it would not fall from a cart, and he was struck dead on the spot. But it was not only a symbol of faith, it was a fearsome weapon. Yet Israel did not understand how to wield it and made a fatal mistake. The people of Israel were at war with the Philistines, their relentless enemies, and the first battle ended in disaster. 4,000 Israelites fell beneath Philistine swords. The camp was shaken by fear and confusion. Desperate, the elders ordered the Ark of the Covenant to be brought into the camp, convinced that its mere presence would give them victory. But they had forgotten that its power did not reside in the object itself, but in obedience to God. So, with great ceremony, they brought the ark from Shiloh. And when the ark entered the camp, the Israelites raised a deafening shout that made the earth tremble. The echo reached the Philistine army, but instead of fleeing, the Philistines braced themselves and fought with fury. The battle that followed was even bloodier than the first. Israel was decisively defeated. 30,000 soldiers died that day. The camp was laid waste, and the worst happened. The Ark of God was captured. The sign of the divine presence, the invisible throne of Yahweh, fell into enemy hands. It was a moment of terror for Israel, but the tragedy did not end there. The two priests, Hophni and Phinehas, died in the battle. And when a messenger reached Shiloh with the news that the ark had been taken, The old priest, Eli, toppled backward from his seat, broke his neck, and died. He had served as a judge over Israel for 40 years, but he could not bear the disgrace of seeing the ark in foreign hands. So ended that dark day. Israel did not merely lose a battle, it lost its glory, the sign of God's presence among his people. They had treated the ark like a talisman, but had forgotten the living God who is enthroned upon it. The Philistines, triumphant, carried the ark to the temple of their god Dagon in Ashdod. But the next morning, they found the statue fallen, face down, before the ark. They set it back up, and the next day it had fallen again. This time with its head and hands severed on the threshold, as though the pagan god had been overthrown. Then the disasters began. Plagues and tumors ravaged their cities. Terrified, the Philistines moved the ark from city to city. But wherever it went, terror followed. After 7 months of calamity, the Philistines resolved to send it back. They readied a brand new cart, hitched to 2 cows that had never been yoked, and set beside the ark golden offerings shaped like tumors and mice, the emblems of the plagues they had endured. The cows, with no human guide, walked straight toward the land of Israel, and so the ark returned, proving that neither Philistines nor armies could master it. After its return from Philistine country, the ark was kept under guard for years, until King David determined to bring it to Jerusalem. But it would be his son Solomon who would give the ark its permanent home. King Solomon built a temple to house it. When the ark was placed beneath the golden wings of the cherubim that Solomon had commissioned, something beyond words happened. A cloud filled the temple, and the glory of the Lord covered it with such power that the priests could not remain standing. There, in the dimness, veiled by an impenetrable curtain, the high priest entered only once a year, on Yom Kippur, to sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice on the mercy seat. In that moment, heaven and earth met. And so the ark, which had been a sign of victory in battle and a symbol of judgment among the nations, at last found its rest in the heart of Jerusalem, within the most glorious temple ever built. It was the pinnacle of its history, the throne of God on earth, in the midst of his people. For centuries it rested in Solomon's temple. Only the high priest could enter to see it, once a year, to make atonement for the people's sins. But that splendor would not last forever. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split, and idolatry corrupted Israel and Judah. The prophets warned again and again, if the people abandoned God, Jerusalem would fall. No one listened. In 587 BC, everything changed. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon laid siege to the city, tore down its walls, and set the temple ablaze. The sacred treasures were carried off as plunder, yet the ark appears nowhere on the inventory of looted objects. It was as if it had vanished before the siege began. Here, the mystery begins. Since then, one question has haunted believers and explorers for more than 2,500 years. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? An ancient clue lies in the book of 2nd Maccabees. It says that the prophet Jeremiah, just before the invasion, hid it in a cave on Mount Nebo, declaring that it would remain concealed until God gathers his people. Many believe it still rests there, sealed in the rock, waiting for the appointed hour. But what if it never left Jerusalem? Another theory holds that the priests hid it in the secret tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, a labyrinth that is now inaccessible, where it could still be waiting. just yards from its original resting place. Yet the most famous story takes us to another continent. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims to guard it in a small chapel in Aksum. There, a lone monk, the guardian of the Ark, devotes his life to watching over it. No one else may see it. The search has never ceased. In the 19th century, European explorers claimed to have seen traces of it in Ethiopia. Israeli archaeologists tried to dig in Jerusalem, but religious conflict made it impossible to confirm anything. And during World War II, the Nazi secret society, the Ahnenerbe, hunted for it as well, convinced that it would be the ultimate weapon to secure the Reich's supremacy. They all failed. To this day, no expedition has produced definitive proof. The Ark remains an inaccessible mystery, shrouded in legends that span continents and centuries. And here is where the mystery reveals its true purpose. Perhaps the Ark was never lost. It was hidden. Its power, capable of toppling empires, was never meant to fall into human hands. Its disappearance was its greatest act of divine protection. But the story does not end here. The Bible offers one last, astonishing clue to its fate. The book of Revelation foretells that the Ark will be seen again, not by an archaeologist, but by all of humanity. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the Ark of his covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is not a lost treasure waiting to be found. It is a promise suspended in history, a mystery that binds Israel's glorious past to humanity's prophetic future. But there may be even more of Jesus' belongings among us without our even knowing it. Empress Helena recovered other relics of Christ and carried them to what was then the safest place on earth, Constantinople. But many were lost in one of the darkest episodes of the Middle Ages, the sack of Constantinople. Before that catastrophe, Byzantium was the greatest Christian treasure house in the world. For centuries, it safeguarded the relics that Saint Helena had brought from Jerusalem in the 4th century. Among them was the purple mantle that the soldiers threw over Jesus to mock him as King of the Jews. The Bible tells it like this: "They clothed him in a scarlet robe, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head." Imagine standing before that very piece of cloth. Beside it, they kept the reed that they put in his hand as a fake scepter while they jeered at him. A symbol of the deepest humiliation turned into a sacred treasure. And some accounts claim that the sponge soaked in sour wine was there, the very one that a soldier used to offer him something to drink in his final moments. As the Gospel says, they filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to his lips. For centuries, these relics, safeguarded in Constantinople, were kept as the most precious treasures of the Eastern Christian Empire. They were displayed only in solemn processions and on days of celebration. But in 1204, everything changed. The Fourth Crusade was launched. Soldiers with crosses on their chests were supposedly marching to the Holy Land, but they veered off course. Instead of fighting the enemy, they turned on their own brothers. They reached the gates of Constantinople. The Crusaders sacked the city. The capital of Eastern Christendom was desecrated and plundered by Christians from the West. In the chaos, the relics were scattered. Some were stolen and sold, ending up in cities like Venice and Paris. But many others simply vanished, lost forever. And here, the true mystery begins. For centuries, these lost relics have fueled quests, legends, and mysteries, inspiring pilgrims and adventurers alike. The paradox is that the very empire that safeguarded them as its greatest treasure for nearly 1,000 years was plundered by those who came in the name of the cross. And since then, the echo of those vanished relics has reverberated through faith and history. Fragments of Christ's past that may have once existed now turned into symbols of mystery and loss. But the Bible is full of mysteries and fascinating details that prove its message is real. Many of the places mentioned in the Bible still exist today, even though most people do not know about them. If you want to discover these amazing locations, you have to watch the video on the screen. 18 biblical sites that still exist today. Click on the screen. You do not want to miss it.